Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and you join me here. We're here in Big Mountain actually, or the Big Empty, whatever you want to call it, for the next part of the Wasteland Ecology. So working my way through all the kind of DLCs that take you to a different place that's real. So we're not really going to talk about Operation Anchorage or anything, because that's all a simulation, and not really going to cover those ones, but certainly some of the places that the DLCs take you to in these games are very, very interesting to talk about, and Big Mountain is one of them. I'm going to cover everything in the one video because it's a small location. There's not enough to say about it to split it into 2 or 3 videos, I think, so we're going to cover everything in one. You can see the lobotomites down there, they kind of look like ants from up here. So obviously we're on the sink balcony looking out over the big crater. It's a very interesting one because the history is quite unique, and the mad science experiments have created quite an unusual location to explore. So we're going to start at the very beginning. So the pre-war version of this place was a research facility that was hidden away inside a mountain, a big mountain if you will, and it was built into caverns within the mountain, so it was an underground location, obviously to hide some of the crazy and horrible things that they were doing here. They had a camp for prisoners of war, essentially, to be used as test subjects and things. And the location, it's not kind of exact, and the developers didn't really want to give us a precise location, but it does seem to be to the west of the Mojave Desert, so between Vegas and California locations, and also south of Hopeville, but kind of near the divide. So there is kind of a connection to the supply lines that the NCR is using to get to the Mojave, and that is kind of an impact as well. So it's somewhere in that kind of region is where this is located, and it was a mountain, so it wasn't open to the sky like it is now. And the reason for that is that there was a slight mishap at the YO Research Centre, which is located, you can't actually get into it, I don't think, because it's a bit broken. Where is it? Can't remember where it is. There it is, up here, yeah. So right up in the very kind of north, the YO Research Centre. And that's actually where the vending machines that you find in the Sierra Madre were developed. And it seems that Dr. Klein forgot to carry the 2 in his calculations and blew the place up. Is what happened. At least that's what Mobius thinks, is that it was Dr. Klein's bad math that did it. And that's resulted in this new open-top version of Big Mountain, now fondly known as the crater. And you can see, obviously, there's kind of high hills and mountain providing a kind of natural border around the crater now. So it would have been all one big mountain until some bad calculations open it up to the sky. So the thing about this place is that almost everything here is artificial or has been altered in some way, including you as the player character when you come here. And everything that is alive or moving generally wants to kill you. So surviving here is not an easy task, and it's a very small map. I mean, you can see there's X13 there. Like, that's the edge of this map. It is a very small map. It's a very dense map. There's a lot packed into such a small space. Which makes it very, very interesting to explore as well. So most of the ground was born inside the mountain. It's all kind of rock that has then been kind of dug out or destroyed by the explosion that caused the mountain itself to disappear. So in terms of plant life, there's not really a lot naturally occurring around here. but we have a lot of angry robots and explosives and other mad science nonsense, which we'll get into. But the area does fit in with its history pretty well. So, we can see we've got all these kind of cliffs and canyons that have been formed, and there's this natural rocky wall around the crater that rises up in the distance. So that boundary prevents easy access to the place without a transportal ponder. But there are railway lines too. Famously, Elijah blew one of them up when he escaped from where he left the crater. And presumably pre-war, that's how people got in and out. We know the big six scientists, so Mobius and Klein and Dalla and Dr. Zero, Dr. 8, Dr. Boris, they all lived here on site in Higgs Village, but they would have still needed to get materials coming in and potentially shipping out products that they've made that have been going to do, whatever, like the causing havoc at the Sierra Madre, for example. So the trains were probably the way that they did that before the war happened. But the northern part of the crater, which is very, very interesting, around there, so we could see it from the balcony here to the forbidden zone. Because I want to talk about this stuff. So obviously, the explosion has dug out a lot of stuff here. There's the train tunnel with the crashed train in it and things. But I wanted to talk about these things. So we've got these huge kind of glowing red crystals that have emerged as a result of the damage done to the rock and the mountain. And I couldn't really find anything on the Fallout wiki about them, but I did do a bit of digging just to see if anybody had any thoughts on what they actually were. Were they something that was naturally occurring, or were they something that was created by one of the mad science experiments? And I found a post on Reddit from 10 years ago, which suggested that they were naturally occurring Wulfenite. So me being me ended up in a Wikipedia rabbit hole reading about this stuff. So Wulfenite, it's a mineral that's common in this area of the US, so between sort of Arizona, Nevada and California, that whole kind of region. And it's a mineral that contains lead and molybdenum as a molybdenoxyanion. Try saying that 5 times fast. I'm good at science, just not always great at pronouncing the big words, even if I know what they mean. Saying them and understanding them are two different things. But I'd never heard of Wulfenite before looking into, preparing this video for you guys. So I will put a link to the wiki page for anyone that's interested in it. But it seems that the red coloration of this mineral is caused by traces of chromium. Which, that happens. It's the same thing with, diamonds, that you can get coloured diamonds because they have trace amounts of another element in them that changes the colour. Because different elements absorb and reflect different wavelengths of light and change colours and things. Spectral photometry is a whole scientific discipline based around that particular property of different elements and different minerals and things like that. So very, very interesting kind of side to the science. Wouldn't recommend eating it, even though it does look potentially quite tasty, because there's lead is bad. But interestingly, molybdenum is an essential nutrient, and it is one that you do need in trace amounts in your diet, although it's not one that's difficult to get in most of your foods. Particularly, it is an element that plays a role in enzymes involved in nitrogen fixation. So that's where plants, particularly legumes, are good at this. And they kind of take nitrogen and get it into the soil so that it can become a useful nutrient for the plants themselves and then for whatever eats the plants. So nitrogen fixation is quite an important part of the food chain. And nitrogen is something that's needed for protein production and things like that as well. So molybdenum does work as kind of like a coenzyme for nitrogen fixation. And funnily enough, the name for molybdenum comes from the Greek word for lead, because the molybdenum ores could be confused for lead, or because they look quite similar. So an interesting one, but obviously not a mistake that you want to make, because lead is pretty bad for you. We know that. You need to be careful with the stuff, and don't eat it. But there is one fun thing. I can't remember exactly where it is. I don't think I've got that trait on this character. Check. No, I don't. But if you do have Wild Wasteland, there is a location where you can find some of these crystals. And there's garden gnomes surrounding the crystals with little pickaxes. 7 of them to be precise, so I'm sure you can get that reference. It's not exactly a subtle one, but it is kind of funny that that's the thing. It might actually be here that you find it if you have Wild Wasteland on. You find the 7 dwarves, basically. So, you know, that's kind of interesting. Right, so next location. So next up we want to talk about water. Obviously we have established that water is an important part of any ecological system and life cycle. It's essential for life. But there isn't really any rivers or lakes or anything, because this is all a mountain, and while mountains can have underground rivers and lakes, it doesn't seem to be the case here. But presumably the plumbing system is kind of exists and is intact, so there must be a source that's all connected to supply water for experiments as well as for people to live and, you know, flush toilets and all that kind of stuff. We need that. But you can find water here. So this is the magnetohydraulics complex. So it's right here, just to the north of the sink. The main dome is in here. And the water's clean, so no radiation. It's all pretty good. But you also find an important thing here. So if you want to use the sink, we'll get back to that, then you need to come here to get the holotape for it. So I say there's no natural kind of water source on the surface, but they obviously have a plumbing system. The scientists lived here at Higgs Village, and I would hope that the prisoners at the little Yangtze camp got water too, but who knows, because they weren't treated very well, so maybe they weren't allowed to have it. But yeah, this place is flooding, but it is a broken pipe essentially that's creating that. Not a problem right enough if you have the rebreather, which I am not wearing, but I think I do have it on this character. But you need to come here to get the software for the sink in the sink, which is, apologies, this might turn into a bit of a rant. Fine, we're walking. This bloody game. Listen, I love Fallout New Vegas as much as the next guy, but the way it crashes, it's for Old World Blues, it seems to be if you fast travel, it just doesn't like it and it crashes, and I've had 2 crash the desktop in the space of like a minute, which I don't really appreciate, but so we're just walking. But yeah, as I was saying, I'm going to have a bit of a rant here, especially since Microsoft have just taken 85 quid off me to renew my Microsoft Office subscription, because as an author, Microsoft Word is the gold standard for the publishing industry, so I kind of need to have it, and it's really annoying, because, you know, does anyone remember the days when you just bought software and you owned the software and that was it, and you didn't have to subscribe to it? You got updates when they fixed bugs and things, and otherwise that software was yours. And now it's just like, no, you're just gonna have to keep paying us money, for what often tends to be an inferior product. Anyway, So that kind of shenanigans also happens here, as we will discuss when I find the door to get inside and get up to my little house here. But yeah, so essentially if you want to use the sink in the sink, so the place is called the sink, but I'm talking about the actual sink here that's inside the sink. Very confusing. So she is in here. Because, yeah, this one you have to install software to be able to use the sink in the sink. I would not be surprised if they start asking you for some kind of subscription to the software, even though you risked your life going across the crater in order to get the backup copy, because that's how software works now, and I hate it. But yeah, so if you need to fill up empty bottles, you have to find the upgrade for this software. So if you want to take empty bottles and fill them with water, then you have to buy a DLC essentially. So, you know, that's...
You're back, and the brains didn't lobotomize you. Well, not any worse at least. Hooray!
Thank you. Yeah. Also, the sink, she is English for some reason. But... yeah, because obviously...
Come back anytime you want a drink.
Yeah.
Or to get... clean.
She's also germaphobe.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, you're just creepy though. But yeah, so obviously all the machines in this place talk and have personalities and things, which is kind of fun. But, you know, needing a software upgrade just to fill bottles from a tap in the sink is bonkers. But I don't make the rules here, that's just the way it works. So to get the sink software, you need to go to the magnetohydraulics complex where we were, and it is flooded, but at least there's water if you're in hardcore mode in this game, then obviously you need to have water.
The fish scalpel.
I love the Autodoc in this, he's great. But yeah, so let's head outside to have a look over the crater. So in terms of the food chain, I haven't made a big chart like the other ones because there really isn't that much of a food chain here. And the reason I say that is because we don't really have any herbivores. There's no Brahmin, there's no bighorn, there's nothing like that here, so there isn't really a chain of, you know, edible plants to herbivores to carnivores to apex predators. There is some grass outside the main dome, but it's blue. Might be fake, might be GMO, I don't really know. But there's no herbivores to eat it anyway, so it doesn't really matter if blue grass isn't real. We do have cazadors here, and this is where they were created actually. So they were, Z14 pepsine DNA splicing. So pepsine is the genus for the tarantula hawk wasp, which is what the cazadors are. They were created here, and we know that the adult tarantula hawk wasps eat nectar. It's their larvae that parasiticize a tarantula, which is where the name comes from. So it's unclear what the cazadors eat, whether they're also nectar eaters or if they have remained, you know, carnivorous in some way. But as far as I can tell, they don't kill for the sake of eating, they just kill because they can and they want to. And, you know, they're not even a naturally occurring mutation, they were specifically created by the mad scientists here. Same kind of a thing applies to the Night Stalkers, which again were also a creation here. So this is their location, the Z9 Crotalis DNA Preservation Lab. So again, that comes from the genus of the constituent parts of the Night Stalker, which is a cross between a coyote and a rattlesnake. I have done in-depth videos on both species and how they were created and things. If you're interested, they are in the Science of Foliage series quite a while back now, but they are there. And again, you know, this abomination of nature was created here. There's plenty of meat left for them inside their facility. If you look, there's kind of Brahmin steaks and things that you can find. And there is one recorded incident of a Night Stalker killing and trying to eat a man, named Specialist Acres, and the poor creature choked to death because it tried to swallow him whole because it's part rattlesnake. But it choked because Acres was not a small man. So I'm assuming that they probably will eat people, and there is plenty of lobotomites running around the place that you can generally see. They have a never-ending supply of lobotomites, which are just people but have obviously had their brain removed. And that's kind of the thing here. There is the botanical garden, which is kind of where we started this video. Up here. Going to work the fast travel. Can you do it? Yeah, you did it. Fantastic. So yeah, we've got this bunch of Xander root here. Interestingly. I'm not sure entirely why, but that's... So the X22 Botanical Garden, obviously the number corresponds to Vault 22, makes sense. The species that they have in Vault 22 originated here. So we do have our Brock flowers, and we've got some Xander root and things. We can find some seeds. But we also do have the spore plants and the spore carriers in this location. Again, they weren't really natural mutations. They were kind of created. We've got the cave fungus as well. But again, we don't really know what they eat. If they eat or if they photosynthesize. Because the spore carriers are kind of a form of ghoul, essentially. And the spore plants look like Venus flytrap, kind of carnivorous plants, but again, we don't really know if that's what they eat, if they eat the insects and things. There are bloat flies, but as far as I remember, they're only confined to the mysterious cave where the legendary bloatfly lives. But they eat just about anything, so there's not a clear kind of food chain. But the other kind of enemies that you find are cybernetically or altered. So you've got your lobotomites who have had their brains removed and replaced with technology. You're technically one as well when you come here. Although you get to keep your faculties because Benny shot you in the head and left some scars in your brain, so that's kind of how that works. So that's why you're not as mindless as the lobotomites are. There's also the cyber dogs, which are obviously cyborg canines. How much they need to eat, we don't really know. Is all their kind of robot parts enough to sustain them? Do they want to eat? Do they need to eat? We don't really know, because the thing about the enemies in this location is that they're all part of the same faction. So, you know, the Night Stalkers, the lobotomites, everything else, they don't really fight each other, they don't really attack each other, so unless they're just eating whoever's, you know, if a lobotomite dies, then other things will come along and eat them. Don't really know, but there's just not really any clear kind of food sources for these creatures. And then the only other enemy you need to contend with is a walking skeleton in a spacesuit. And I would assume that, you know, the trauma harnesses don't have any kind of a digestive system, so they're not going to eat food, and they also don't have any meat on their bones, so they're not going to be food for anything else. And then the robo-scorpions, which are obviously entirely robotic, so food isn't a driving factor for their violent tendencies. So, yeah, there's not really a food chain. I'm guessing the lobotomites will just scavenge for whatever they can find. There are, you know, there's still some pre-war food and stuff dotted about. And the Night Stalkers do seem to have food in their little locations. But we don't really know, and I say there's not a proper food chain because we don't have any herbivores that can, you know, that eat plants, and there's really not a lot in terms of plants for them other than, you know, X22 and the blue grass out the front of the dome, which may not even be real, and obviously the biological research station, who likes taking seed from you and is extremely creepy. But again, it's all kind of an artificial environment to grow plants. There's really not much that's growing out here on its own, because all of this was inside a mountain before. And generally speaking, plants require access to sunlight, which doesn't happen inside mountains until someone explodes the top of the mountain, which is what happened. So yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one. Obviously, in the pre-war era, people would, presumably, they would just get food supplies shipped in from outside for the people that were staying here, that were working here, you know, the scientists that lived here, that kind of thing. It's yeah, a very, very interesting environment, and I say Old World Blues is definitely my favourite DLC. Everything about it just brings me so much joy. It's absolute chaos, mad science, but yeah, the grass is definitely a bit on the blue side, so I do kind of question what it is, if it's real, if it's another experiment, something like that. But you know, nothing here is natural, nothing here is naturally occurring, so the usual driving factors for mutations and evolution don't exist here. You know, the things that have been created here have been created on purpose, that we've decided to mess with the tarantula hawk wasp and make it bigger and more aggressive. We've decided to combine coyotes and rattlesnakes, which is a baffling thing, just because, you know, the common ancestor of these species is so far back, we probably don't even know exactly what it was, you know, because the way snakes evolved is quite fascinating, actually, because snakes started out as four-legged creatures, and then they lost their legs, so they kind of, their evolution path was that they gained legs and then they lost them again. You know, and coyotes are obviously carnivores as well, but they're in the mammalian category versus the snake category. There's just so much difference between these species, and clearly the Night Stalkers don't really know how to function as either. They don't know how to function as a coyote, because they're trying to swallow their prey whole, which is what snake does, but coyotes don't do that. They have teeth that chew. Snakes only have teeth to bite. They don't chew their food, they just swallow it whole. That's, you know, and they just seem to be very confused about what they're supposed to be, and it kind of makes me think that perhaps they are living a fairly miserable existence, as what they are. And the lobotomites, I mean, they're just, you know, these people are just, again, they've lost their minds, but they have had their brain replaced with technology. They just don't function like normal humans anymore, and we just don't really know what they're kind of doing. But nothing here has kind of evolved or really found its place in the world in that sense, compared to, you know, the death claws. Obviously they're an artificial mutation as well, but they can function, they can live independently, and they thrive and breed. Obviously they pose a huge danger to the Wasteland, but you know, they've kind of gone off and just kind of made their own path in life, and you know, they've become very successful, which obviously I'm guessing that wasn't the intention when they were created, but that's what happened. Whereas the Night Stalkers just don't really seem to have that same kind of situation. They don't really know what they are. They don't really know how to fully function as what they are. It's yeah, very, very interesting. And if you want to have your survival needs met while you're here in Old World Blues, then you do have to bring stuff with you, or put in a lot of work to install the software and find seeds for the biological research station and do a lot of it yourself. It's all a bit nuts, but it doesn't really have to make sense. You know, it's the Mad Science DLC. It's all supposed to be a bit wacky and nonsensical, but it does mean that, you know, we've got kind of a unique location, a unique environment that you just don't really see anywhere else. But a lot of it is, you know, pretty artificial. It's all been created as an experiment rather than something that's kind of evolved naturally given the changes that have happened to the world, unlike what we see in other places. You know, there isn't anything that's just naturally evolved like the red roaches. They just kind of mutated and evolved because they had everything they needed to do that. That wasn't something that was done on purpose, whereas pretty much everything here, it was done on purpose, even if said purpose was just to see what happens if we do this. And, you know, the scientists are under the impression that none of their experiments have left the crater, and obviously we know that's not true because both the Casdors and the Night Stalkers are found across the Mojave, so they have made their way out and they are, you know, settling and spreading across the wasteland. But yeah, so that covers the ecology. A very unique location for a very unique DLC. That it used to be a mountain, and then the mountain got blown up, so now it's a big crater. But the mad science is still kind of happening in the background. So hopefully you guys found that interesting. We'll be back next week with another DLC. I can't remember off the top of my head which one I've decided to do. Let me see. No, that's not the one. There it is. Just gonna double check what I had planned. Yeah, so on Tuesday we're going to be visiting the Red Racer factory in Fallout 3 because there's quite a few interesting bits and pieces in that place, so that's going to be the location. And then next Saturday the plan is to visit the Divide, which isn't too far away from this place actually, and again it has a very unique environment because of what's happened to the location, so quite a bit of interesting stuff to dig into there, so hopefully you'll join me for that. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe, and as always I do love to hear your thoughts on things, so drop them in the comments below. It's always fun to kind of chat and learn from you guys, so you know, it's something that happens a lot where people share facts that I didn't know about things, and I'm one of those people that is always happy to learn new stuff. So any thoughts, drop them in the comments and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.